welcome to it's a nice Friday morning, and we're here with former Chief of Police, Detroit, James Craig. Welcome to Face to Face.
Hey, thanks, Adolph. I'm glad to be here this morning.
I'm glad to have you. What made you decide to throw your hat in the ring? You kind of it looked like it was the last minute, or did you plan that timing?
Well, I got to tell you, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. Contrary to what I did come in on a little bit of the late side. That certainly was by design. I think I'll go back as far as November of last year when I really started giving a run some serious thought. Even before that, I've never really had an interest in politics. As you know, I entered into the last cycle of the gubernatorial race. And I asked myself, why now? Why do it? I've been a lifelong public servant, 44 years in law enforcement. And as I look back at my career, there was some early inklings of politics. I mean, I talk about my time in Los Angeles, where I served almost 3 decades. At one point during my stint, I became the president of an African-American police officer association called Oscar Joe Bryant. The irony of entering in and becoming that president was the same time of the Rodney King incident. So here I'm a young sergeant. I'm serving as the president, representing African-American police officers in LA. And now I'm thrusted in the national spotlight, well, international spotlight, really, because Rodney King was probably the first videotape of police excessive force, as you know.
Yeah, that's no question about it. I wanted to ask you a question. You were a police chief in Portland, Maine, right?
Yes, Portland, Maine, and Cincinnati.
And you say you didn't dabble in politics? I've been to Portland, Maine. Nice city. You know what? I've been there a couple times. First time that I went there, they didn't have a problem with the homeless population. The last time I went there, it seemed like, man, it was a magnet where all the homeless folks from Maine in that area was moving into that area. That is that. How did you get that job, and how long did you stay in Portland?
Well, what's interesting about Portland, Maine? So here I'm sitting as a commanding officer of one of LA's toughest stations in South LA, Southwest Division. I was there for 6 years, and I had set a goal many years ago of becoming a police chief, and it was a very detailed goal. I mean, I said by the time I'm 51 years old, I want to be a police chief. But I wanted to be a police chief of a major city. Now, when you look at Portland, Maine is certainly not considered a major city, although it is the biggest city in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
So I was in a couple of processes. I was a finalist in Boston, Massachusetts. I was also a finalist in Tucson, Arizona. And what was interesting about Tucson, I had applied for Portland, Maine. I had never been to Portland, Maine. But what I did learn about the process, there were in excess of 80 candidates competing for that one chief of police job. And so I said, what is it about Maine? What is it about Portland? Why so many people are interested? Small city, and I had never worked in a small municipality. I started in Detroit, shortly after high school, left after a layoff when Coleman Young laid off police officers. And then certainly went and spent, like I said, 3 decades almost in Los Angeles. And then you bring Portland, Maine. And when you talk about the demographic of Portland, Maine, it was probably 97% Caucasian.
Yeah.
In fact, it was probably less than 1% African-American. However, Portland, Maine, a lot of folks don't know this, 3rd largest community for Somali and Sudanese.
And the Speaker of the House was a Black woman who represented Portland, Maine. Right. Went to Augusta. A job like that, a job in LA, you were in Cincinnati, then Detroit. Does that prepare you for a job being the mayor of a major city like Detroit?
Absolutely. One thing I learned, as now having been a police chief in 3 cities, at one point during my career, I was what was called the adjutant. I was a lieutenant and adjutant to the chief of police, the second African-American police chief in Los Angeles, Bernard Parks. Certainly, Bernard Parks went on from his time as chief and became an elected city council member, LA City Council. So I learned a lot politically. I mean, even as a chief, even though it's an appointed position, you're not connected to any political party because you're not elected. Unlike sheriffs, police chiefs are appointed, sheriffs are elected. So in many ways, they're more of a politician, but clearly your exposure as a police chief is directly political. You certainly, you work closely with the community, you work closely with budgets. You do everything short of, and typically in any municipality, the police budget is the largest budget in a municipal government. So that's the way it is because you talk about staffing costs, equipment, lawsuits. It's just a job that absolutely prepares you if you decide to go into politics. Now, again, when I set a goal to become a chief of police, I wasn't thinking that, well, one day I'll run for governor, one day I'll run for mayor. I wanted to be a chief of police. And when I tell folks about my professional career, the best years of my 44-year career in law enforcement was my last 8 years here in Detroit as a chief, because that was my ultimate goal one day, to become the chief of police in the city of Detroit.
Well, you got that, but what made you decide, well, I want to run for governor? Seemed like that came out of left field. And then, being the police chief in a city that's 99 or 98% Democrat, Black, and you said, you know what, I'm a Republican, and I want to run as a Republican for governor. How did you come about?
Well, this is a great question
to do that.
Right. It's a great question because, contrary to belief, some thought, well, I only became a Republican to run for governor. That's absolutely not true. As my story goes, I was a longtime conservative Democrat, a JFK Democrat, in fact. My parents were Democrats, conservative Democrats, like many African Americans in our city, especially church folk, African Americans in Detroit, conservative. Now, there's been some shift, of course, and I spent the lion's share of my career in Los Angeles, which is very Democratic. So, and during my time in LA, I could say, yes, I was a Democrat, but I started even making the party I felt started to leave me then. I remember an encounter I had with Maxine Waters, which I know out of LA during the Rodney King event. And at that time, I was a Democrat. And I remember she called me to a meeting with my board, because again, I was the president of African American Police Association. And when she called me in for the meeting, she berated me, berated our board, and just could not understand how, as Black men and women, we could work for the racist LAPD. Of course, she didn't say it quite that eloquent. And so I ended the meeting, given the barrage of disrespect that was hurled at all of us, especially me as the president.
Well, same way she working in Congress, and some people say that's one of the most racist institutions in America. So, we got to do what we got to do.
Right. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I'm coming out with a book about my journey as a public servant, and it's going to talk about my experiences. Like I said, I entered into the Detroit Police Department in the late 70s, 1977. Coleman Young was the mayor, first African-American mayor in Detroit. And when I look back at my time then and what Coleman was trying to accomplish was really something that was so unique in the country, because what he wanted to do with the police department, and he said it, I want a police department that reflects the community that I'm leading.
And he worked. It took 20 years. 20 years
He did that. In fact, my academy class in 1977 was probably, conservative estimate, 80% African American, 25% women. He was responsible for the wave that went across America in women in law enforcement. It was in the 70s when women started coming into law enforcement, but it was really Coleman Young who opened that door. Because by the time I left Detroit and went to LA in the early 80s, LA still was predominantly a Caucasian men, were dominant in the LAPD. LAPD was trying to diversify.
Who was the chief then when you went to LA?
It was Daryl Gates. And Daryl Gates,
he the one had the lifetime job.
That's when chiefs had lifetime appointments, basically. I mean, it was unheard of that chiefs really got fired. But when a lot of things started to shift in America, especially in communities of color, that changed everything. And I know you know this, Adolph. I mean, I was probably the second longest running chief in Detroit in recent history.
I know, because we had quite a few. I want to ask you, you buck in the history. We haven't had a Republican mayor since the 50s,
1956.
And he was the last one, and we hadn't had a Republican on the council since Reverend Keith Butler. This is nonpartisan, so there's no R&D on that. But Absolutely. You know what folks gonna do? They're gonna paint you as that big time Republican. How do you get around that? Is that an advantage? And also, is the president gonna come and campaign for you?
So here's what I say to that. It is a nonpartisan race, as you indicated. That's first and foremost. Secondly, I am a Detroiter. I don't want to be put in a box, say, well, he's a Republican. I mean, I get that there's a lot of division today when it comes to politics, but it's one thing my mom and dad taught me growing up here in Detroit is that my mom was a long-time poll worker. She taught me, my siblings, the importance of voting. That was a strong push in our household growing up. I didn't know why it was so important as a child, but it resonated, stuck with me throughout my adult life. And so that said, the one thing my mom always said, and my dad said it too, he says, it's not about party. Don't vote for party, vote for person. I established a strong reputation here as the Detroit police chief. People know me. They understood and watched me lead for 8 years. They watched me take a department, and I can go through just a laundry list of many of the issues that I was confronted with, that the city was going through, because we went through bankruptcy. So I say to the R and the D, it's not about that. It's about leadership. It's about someone taking the great work that Mayor Duggan started and is continuing to this day, but there's more work to be done. What
need to be done? Name a couple of things that you would do differently that, say, Duggan hasn't done or didn't get to, and nobody else is talking about.
Well, I think the top issue that I knew it as police chief, and I served also at the same time during my administration as deputy mayor. One of the things I've always heard, we can see what's going on in downtown, Corktown, Midtown. But chief, what about my neighborhood? What about my neighborhood? We need more put into our neighborhoods, our communities, because that's where it's lacking. And while there has been some work in the neighborhoods, but clearly by most, and I'm listening to the community, and they've always said it, we need more attention. This is one Detroit, not two Detroits. Well, I mean, it's no secret that when you talk about the 70s, Black home ownership, we were number one in the country.
Yeah.
But of course, we had great jobs. You know, the automobile manufacturing. I worked a plant right out of high school. I was 18 years old and was earning a great salary. And there was no abandoned homes or very few, Black home ownership. And right now, there are more renters, African-American renters, than there are homeowners. So that's got to change, and it can change. And again, I'm not taking away some of the programs or criticizing the programs that Mike Duggan started. I think we have to do better in supporting small businesses. I think, you know, I'll give you an example. I had met a African-American woman who just recently opened a cigar bar restaurant, like a sports bar. It's still under construction, but it's open. She's had a soft opening. And I met with her and we talked about her business, and she's got 2 side lots next to this business on the east side of Detroit over on Mac near Connor. But what resonated with me, she said, I own 3 businesses, Chief. I said, wow, so where are your other 2 businesses in Detroit? Making the assumption. She said, no. This is the only Detroit business. I have 2 other businesses, and they're both in the city of Dearborn. I said, well, why would you put your other 2 businesses in Dearborn? She said, because it's friendlier. I mean, the bureaucratic red tape that exists in Detroit, I didn't want to go through that with my other businesses. And so if it wasn't for that, I would have all 3 businesses. So I had a conversation with another businessman who's been a long-time businessman on the west side of Detroit. And you know what he told me? He said, Chief, I love the city of Detroit. As you can see, I own this block here and all across the street. And I know Mayor Duggan tried to resolve the whole insurance issue, but I'm paying too much insurance for these businesses. What can be done? And oh, by the way, it was a green light business as well. Now, as you know, we started Green Light on my watch. It was something that I felt needed to happen to create a safe environment. Because, you know, if you don't have safety, it's hard to have businesses thrive.
Is it working? Do Green Light really work?
Absolutely. And to my critics, and, you know, Adolph, you know, people say, well, I don't think Green Light works. I said, what makes you say that? I'll tell you how Green Light came about. So when I arrived in Detroit in 2013, I came at the half-year point, a little bit past. I came in July, and the year ended with over 800 carjackings. And I think the thing that was most shocking to me was Detroiters, by and large, were desensitized with carjackings. The police officers were desensitized. And to me, coming out of a place like LA, and especially working in South LA, which is where most of the violent crime, not that carjackings didn't happen, but when there was a carjacking, that's probably one of the most violent type robberies. I mean, imagine being dragged out of a car at gunpoint while stopped at a traffic light, or going to a gas station, and somebody puts a gun in your face and takes your car. That's a serious crime.
There's no question.
But 800 of them. So, you know, I had started a crime program to understand data and to understand where carjackings were happening. So predictably, carjackings were happening primarily at gas stations, liquor stores, and they were occurring mainly during the hours of darkness. So I woke up one morning and thought, how do I create those places as not places of opportunities to commit robbery, but safe zones? Just like everybody believes that, you know, in Detroit, if you go to a police station, if you're being followed, that's a safe location. I said, what about these businesses? And so we got with 8 gas station owners, clean places, welcoming places. And I went on to say, I started talking about this public-private partnership. I said, if we can create an opportunity that people who live and work in Detroit can come to your location because it's a safe location, why not? And we'll denote it by a blinking green light. So as Mike Duggan came into office and he started doing a lot of the, what I call, he was focusing, as he should have, on some of what is taken for granted. I call it the basics. I've never worked or lived in a city where streetlights weren't on. I never worked or lived in a city where garbage wasn't routinely picked up. I never worked or lived in a city where transportation was an issue. These are basic necessities.
And these are the main issues, some of the main issues that Detroiters are complaining about.
Well, and the thing is to watch the transition on addressing basics, and then specifically talking about the police department, 1 hour to 911 call for service when I got here. A clearance rate to homicide, 11%, probably the lowest of any major city in the country. And then not to mention the fact that when I came in, the community by and large did not trust the Detroit Police Department.
How you think the police is doing now?
Well, you know, right now I have a more of a remote view of what's happening. Of course, people come to me and have come to me since I left, and they'll say things to me like, Chief, I miss you. I wish you were back running the police department. I hear that daily, Adolph, daily. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism of the two chiefs. That
they comfortable with you. You want to be the mayor. Why should people say, well, you know what? I want to vote for the former police chief James Craig. Why? Tell me why. Why are you running, Chief? And why should I vote for you?
Well,
I'm undecided. I'm an undecided voter.
Right.
What make me want to come to you? I've been a Democrat all my life, and I've been hearing all this other partisan stuff, but why should I vote for you?
Well, first of all, you know, as I tell folks that come to me, and the petitions that I'm circulating myself, the people that sign my petition, number one, they say, you know, Chief, I believe in you. What you did as chief, in my estimation, you were the best police chief in my lifetime. That's not me saying it. That's what people are coming to me and say. It has nothing to do with the D or the R. The people that have signed my petitions as an example, I would say probably 95% of them, or even higher, are Democrats. I'll tell you this short story. I was sitting next to a gentleman having dinner one day, and he looked over at me. He said, you know, Chief, you did a wonderful job as the police chief in Detroit. You were the best police chief in my lifetime. And I think he's 60 years old. He said, but when you decided to run for governor, and if you had made the ballot, I was not going to vote for you because you're a Republican. I said, okay, I accept that. He said, however, if you run for mayor, I will vote for you. And it comes down to what people want. They don't want to see the city transgress and go back to the way it was. Somebody, and they said, we want somebody who we feel comfortably, who can take the city in the same direction it was going.
So what are you going to do that's different than all the other candidates that's sitting up in there saying that vote for me? What is James Craig plan?
Well, and I've already talked a little bit about it, and I'll, if you want me to repeat what I've already said, and I've said it, and I'll stress it again. So, and forgive me because I like to tell little stories. People want leadership, and that's not to be taken lightly. You know, one of the first responsibilities of a mayor is keeping the community safe, public safety. It just is. I'm not saying that through the lens of just because I've been in law enforcement, but that is a chief responsibility of a president, keep the country safe, a governor, keep the state safe, and a mayor. This is not something I read, but this is the life I led. So, for example, here's an example of failed leadership in my judgment at the seat of the mayor. So we recently saw the terror attack that happened on New Year's Eve in New Orleans. Now, frankly, you look at New Orleans, you look at that footprint where the French Quarter, where the attack took place. This is New Year's Eve. So, of course, and people congregate to French Quarter year round, but what's in place to keep it safe, especially on a day like New Year's Eve? Well, what's ironic, so New Orleans is prepping for the Super Bowl. They removed barriers, or there were some operational barriers in the quarter. And the state of Louisiana had already, what I'm told, created a number of reports about the French Quarter in terms of it being a location ripe for some type of tragedy or terror attack. I'm told, or I learned through news sources, that, you know, the mayor got the report and nothing was done. But after the attack, the mayor and the chief stood there. The chief of police stood there, and when they asked about these barriers to prevent vehicular traffic to come through that footprint, her response was, I didn't know about it. Bad response, failed leadership. That's one. Let's go to Los Angeles, my old home, for a minute. The wildfires. Now, anybody who's been living in LA 2 minutes knows this. If the Santa Ana winds are high, there's a high probability of what? Wildfires.
Yeah.
Anybody, even people that don't live there, know that. For whatever reason,
you saying Karen Bass screwed up?
I'll tell you. I'll replay her initial response. So she goes off to Ghana in the midst of these these Santa Ana winds, and it's not so much she went to Ghana as much as when she got back, and a reporter like you comes up. She getting off the plane, and I watched this, and the question was like this. Hey, Mayor Bass, do you think stripping the fire department's budget was a contributing factor until a contributing factor why the fires couldn't be controlled in LA? She stood there with a blank look on her face, dropped her head, walked away. That, my friend, is not leadership. Now, you've seen me in good and bad situations.
Well, you know the word is, you never met a microphone you didn't like, and that you was the Hollywood guy.
Well, but
one thing, Chief, you and I wish we had a lot of time. You wasn't scared to face reporters and talking about the issues in the city. Now, last few minutes of this interview, you get elected mayor. What's your first 4 priorities as mayor, and how we gonna implement these?
And I've touched on some of the things that are certainly most important, and these are things you do in a simultaneous way. I did it as chief, and I'll do it as mayor. But and of course, there's a lot that still needs to be done in Detroit. But of course, people always think and talk about public safety.
Okay.
And because that's important, and that's my wheelhouse, we're going to enhance the work that started on my watch. Once I get in, I certainly will make a very rapid assessment of where we are as a city in terms of safety. That's always a priority. And here's what I get criticized for, but I'm going to say it again because I know it comes up. This city cannot become vibrant. We cannot hope to increase our population if our public schools are not fixed. Now, you're going to ask me, say, well, Chief, that's
Now, should the mayor be in control of the public schools?
I mean, in theory, okay, but that's not the case right now. So what can I do as the mayor? Because that's not the case.
Well, because if you could change it, would you take control of the schools?
And but see, here's what I will have. I will have the bully pulpit. Now, I've really learned about how damaged our public schools are when I was running for governor. We cannot have a broken school system. And I said, I know this infuriates some. Yes, the teachers need more money. Yes, they need our support, just like the police officers needed support when I came in. And granted, I'm a realist. I don't control the schools.
No.
But I do have a bully pulpit. And I do and can partner with the schools, because to ignore the schools is not going to move this city forward. I was talking to a young entrepreneur who said, and we were talking about her business after 14 years at Rocket Mortgage. And she said, I live in the city of Westland. I said, why? She said, I live in Detroit, but I have a son in high school and he attends Westland High. And that's a good school. Where can I send my child in Detroit?
We got only 2 or 3 schools. That's about it.
My alma mater, Cass Tech,
okay.
Renaissance High,
okay,
and King High School.
Right.
That's it. That's not acceptable. I mean, and so the key is every parent deserves to be able to send their children to a public school at no cost that effectively teaches them. And I always say, this is the start. I know I'm eating my time up, but I got to get this out.
Go ahead.
I learned when I ran for governor that only 8% of the children in 3rd grade could read. The reason why that's important, that is a standard that children in the 3rd grade have to be able to read. So when they go to the 4th grade, they read to learn. So if you're telling me that only 8% of children in 3rd grade can read, that's not a passing grade.
And I bet at 60-70% can rap and regurgitate all the lyrics from some of this music that they listen to, or they can play football and know all these little plays and basketball quickly. How do people get in touch with you if they want to join your campaign?
Right. And I look forward to that. And I thank all the people that are volunteering and certainly donating to the campaign. But it's chiefcraigformayor.com. chiefcraigformayor.com. All your viewers, I encourage you to join this winning team. Well, and we will move Detroit forward.
Is the president going to come in and campaign for you?
Oh, well, I can't speak to whether he'd come in and campaign, but it's no secret that I'm the candidate that will have a direct line into the White House. And I got to tell you, that's very important. Why? Mayor Duggan had the benefit of having a relationship with President Biden. That certainly didn't hurt this city. And whether your viewers like the sitting president or not, this is not about James Craig. It's about supporting this city.
You're saying you can pick up a telephone and call the White House and he'll call you back, or he'll answer the phone.
He absolutely knows who James Craig is. And he told me something while he was on the campaign trail, and I never forgot it. And I believe what he said. I didn't know what it meant because I hadn't announced, wasn't thinking necessarily about running for mayor. And he says, I'm not going to forget you.
Okay. Well, this is James Craig, former police chief, city of Detroit. I'm amazed you was the police chief from Portland, Maine. I like Portland, Maine. Great tourist city.
Yes.
Waterfront. Listen, but then I found out you were the police chief. They got a black woman that's the Speaker of the House in Augusta. I said, damn, man. And then they got a large African population. I said, it's not the Maine that I read about.
Right.
But it is. Thank you, Chief Craig. We're going to have you on the show again. And good luck in your race.
I appreciate it.
We'll see you down the road.
Okay, look forward to it.
Okay, this is Adolph Mongo, face to face on Detroit in black and white.
Have a great one.